Hello again. So today we will be discussing two subtopics under the topic the time value of money. So first is the concept of equivalence and the second is the notation and cash flow diagrams and tables. These are just short discussions per topic, so bear with me. Alternatives should be compared when they produce similar results, serve the same purpose, or accomplish the same function. But that is not always possible in some types of economy studies. But now let's direct our attention in answering the question, how can alternatives for providing the same service or serving the same purpose, accomplishing the same function be compared when interest is involved over extended periods of time? So now, we should consider the comparison of alternative options. Later, I will discuss it. So, but first, before ko mo focus sa kung unsa atong topics karon, I just want to show this figure, the illustration of simple versus compound interest. This is in connection to our previous topic na I think this is kanang helpful in visualizing unsa ang difference niya. So simple interest is this one here. Although pareha siya o principal amount, and then makita nimo kung unsay difference di ay sa kung simple interest lang ato i-compute and ang compound interest niya, which is computed as katong per period na interest nato, diba? So ana lang siya, mo ni siya ang difference. And again, I mentioned in our previous na kanang lecture video about interests na dili ra kaayo siguro sakit tan-awon if 1,331 versus 1,300 ang kuan atong i-compare. But then, use this formula, apply it to bigger amounts, then you will know unsa kadako ang difference nila. Okay, so now let's proceed. Again, as what I mentioned in the introduction, na kailangan nato i-consider ang comparison of alternative options, natin mga proposals, and we will try to reduce this to an equivalent basis that is dependent on these three. First is the interest rate, second is the amount of money involved, and third is the timing of the monetary receipts or expenses. So, for us to better understand the mechanics of interest and to explain the concept of equivalence, let's do some example. So we have an example here so that we can better understand the mechanics of interest. Let's say you are in a situation where you borrowed a money from your credit card, or nagamit nimo siya, or gigamit nimo imong credit card, and you have a $17,000 na balance. So, one day, you decided na since it's been kanang gabugat-bugat ra siya sa imong mga expenses every month, ana, okay, so bayaran na lang gid nimo ang imong $17,000 na utang in 4 months. An unpaid credit card balance at the beginning of the month will be charged interest at the rate of 1% by your credit card company. Ana man na, diba? So for this situation, naay gi-present diri nga 3 plans on unsaon pag-repay ang $17,000 na principal plus ang interest na kanang na gihulam or kuan. Okay, so mo ni siya mga plans na naka-demonstrate. So okay, let's go through isa-isaho na to ang mga plans kung asa ang feeling nimo mas best na alternative that will work for you. Okay, ang plan 1 is you pay the interest due at end of each month and principal at end of 4th month. So kung nakaplano ka na 4 months nimo gusto unsa na sa Bisaya, maimpas ang $17,000 na utang nimo, wala pa mo ko'y kwarta sa first 3 months, so bayaran na lang sana ako ang interest niya for the 3 months, and then sa 4th month na ko magbayad sa principal plus ang kuan niya nga interest. So ingana ang plan 1. So ang monthly payment of interest, diba, I mentioned earlier that 1% um, ang interest rate per month sa unpaid balance of the principal. So because interest does not accumulate in plan 1, diba wala man na siya nag-accumulate, wala siya nag-base sa katong, wala siya nag-accumulate, dili ni siya, walay compounding interest na nahitabo dire. Okay, so sa table 4-1 na kay $68,000 months of borrowing. For example, 17,000 times 4, and nakay 680 na total interest. Therefore, kung i-check lang nato na para ma-sure ta nga 1% gyud ang kanang interest rate niya, equivalent niya nga kuan. Ang mahitabo na is i-divide na to ang $680 sa 68,000 nga dollar months. So times 100, makakuha ka og 1%. So muna. So therefore, nakay 1% na interest rate niya. Now let's go to plan 2. Ang plan 2 is you pay off the debt in 4 equal end of month installments. Meaning, 17,000 i-divide plus ang interest na for 4 months, imo na i-predict daan or i-compute as a whole, then i-divided by nimo siya kung pila ang kani siya dire, divided by 4 para equal parts nimo siya, equal end mo na yung term of the month installments. So for this purpose, wala pa ni method on how we come up to this, but we will discuss that later on. Pero diri ang nahitabuan is compounded ang interest. And ang 17,000 na principal nimo is completely, pag imo lang gyud tan-awon, ma-completely repay gyud nimo siya within 4 months. Within 4 months, wala na kay humana siya, okay na siya. So, ang monthly interest kung i-check na po na to ang monthly interest rate niya, that would be 427, di total lang ni nato, 0.10 divided by 42,709 dollar months of borrowing. So times 100, so 91%. So basically in plan 2, there are fewer dollar months, 42 versus 68, of borrowing in plan 2 as compared with plan 1 because ang principal nimo is being repaid every month, and ang total amount of interest paid na 427 is of course less than kaning sa plan 1, which is 427.10 lang. Okay, so finally in plan 3, we have to pay the principal and interest in one payment at end of 4th month. So again, for plan 3, ang principal and interest isahon ra niya og bayad sa 4th month, sa end sa month 4. So a single lump sum amount of 17,690 is repaid. This is being computed by adding ang principal amount plus ang accumulate padulong sa month 4 na interest, which is 690.27. So, if we are going to compare and kanang check ang dollar months of borrowing, dako kayo siya, 69,000. Okay? This is because wala may nabayaran sa first 3 months na principal and accumulated interest. Sa 4th month lang siya nabayaran tanan. So, if we are going to check the ratio again sa total interest paid to the dollar months, this is 690 divided by your 69K, you will get 0.01. So, which do you think effective plan for you to settle as sa imo pilion. But take note, for credit card companies, they would not murag dili sila mo agree for plan 1 and plan 3 nga sige interest I think sa plan 1 is okay pero magkadako gyud siya kay simple dili man gani siya compounded. Yeah. So murag walay mo agree na credit card company sa plan 1 and plan 3. Siguro plan 2 is most likely realistic na computation or nga alternative. Ang plan 3, no. At I think the credit card companies would charge a minimum amount per month so that they'll know na you still availing or active pa ba kasi mong account. And then mag-accumulate ang imo mga payments. So same with plan 1. Walay ingani ka simple nga computation for that. Interest, and okay, pay lang ka o kuan. Magka-compounded pud siya gyud. So, yeah. So, the example brings us back to the concept of economic equivalence. So, if the interest rate remains at 1% per month, you should be indifferent as to which plan you use to prepay katong $17,000 na gihulam nimo from the credit card company. So this assumes that you are charged 1% of the outstanding principal balance. Of course, this includes the any unpaid interest each month for the next 4 months, or let's say kung i-apply nimo siya sa real life na scenario kung pila ang period na imong giset. So if interest rates in the economy go up and increase your credit card rate to say 1.25% per month, these plans na we have discussed are no longer equivalent. So what varies among the 3 plans is the rate at which principal is repaid and how interest is repaid. Now, we are now on our second topic for this discussion. We have the notation and cash flow diagrams and tables. So here are the following notation that is being utilized in our formula for compound interest calculations. So familiarize this notations. I is for effective interest rate. For interest period, we have N, the number of periods. P is the present sum of money. F is the future sum. A is the end of period cash flows, or what you call the equivalent end of period values in a uniform series continuing for a specified number of periods starting at the end of the first period. Again, at the end of the first period and padulong siya sa last period. The difference between total cash inflows, or what you call receipts, and cash outflows or expenditures for a specified period of time, let's say 1 year, is the net cash flow for the period. Okay? And as discussed in the previous topics that we have, cash flows are important in engineering economy because they form the basis for evaluating alternatives. Indeed, the usefulness of cash flow diagrams for economic analysis problems is analogous to that of the free body diagram for kanang sa inyong mga mechanics na mga problems. So here, the figure on the left of this slide shows a cash flow diagram. Here, this one, for plan 3, katong plan 3 na to, sa previous table that we have discussed, and the figure 4-3, what we call the cash flow diagram for plan 2, sa atong previous example. So these two figures also illustrate the definition of the preceding symbols and their placement on a cash flow diagram. So if you can notice, all the cash flows have been placed at the end of the month. See here, month 1, end of month, to correspond with the convention we use in our example. So in addition, a viewpoint has been specified. So here, allow me to um, mention the following several convention of the cash flow diagram. So first, the horizontal line is a time scale. Okay. Um, when you say time scale, na-ashay ka ng progression of time. We start from the left and then to the right. So the period, if we have set ka ng, pwede ta mag-set up by month, quarter, or year. Pwede nimo siya i-label ana. And you can also set mga intervals of time rather than 2 points on the time scale. So for example, that the end of period 2 kani siya is coincident with the beginning of period 3. Diba? So mag-coincide sila. When the end of period cash flow convention is used, period numbers are placed at the end of each time interval as illustrated in this. And second, the arrows signify cash flows and are placed at the end of the period. Okay. So the arrows, if a distinction needs to be made, downward arrow, just like this one, kay arrow man pod siya, represent expenses or negative cash flows or cash outflows. And an upward arrow represent receipts or positive na cash flows or cash inflows. Okay. This one. Third is the cash flow diagram is dependent on the point of view. For example, ang situations na makita nato ani ng mga figures for figure 2 and 3, 4-2 and 4-3 were based on cash flow as seen by the lender. Or sa previous na example if sa case sa previous nato na example, that would be the credit card company. If the directions of all arrows had been reversed, so what would that mean? Possibly nga, ang problem would have been diagrammed from the borrower's viewpoint. So pwede po siya. Okay. So let's have an example for cash flow diagramming. So before evaluating the economic merits of a proposed investment, the XYZ Corporation insists that its engineers develop a cash flow diagram of the proposal. An investment of $10,000 can be made that will produce $10,000. Diretso na ako siya sa cash flow. Investment, so downward arrow, that will produce uniform annual revenue of $5,310 for 5 years. So, within period 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, na akay 5,300 upward arrow that represents the annual revenue. Okay, and then have a market or a recovery value of $2,000 at the end of year or EOI 5, end of year 5. So sa end of year 5 nato na akay 2,000 na what do you call this one? A market value of 2,000. So dira nimo siya i-add, okay? And then annual expenses will be 3,000 at the end of each year for operating and maintaining the project. Annual expenses will be 5,000 at the end of each year. So another 3,000, which is represented by the downward arrow, no, and kay expenses man siya, operating, and draw a cash flow diagram for that. Okay, sige. this is important, use the corporation's viewpoint. So not the other way. So but the corporation's viewpoint. So as shown in the figure below, the initial investment of $10,000 investment and annual expenses of 3,000 are cash outflows. Okay, cash outflows are negative cash flows. This could be mga expenses. And while annual revenues and the market value are cash inflows. Cash inflows meaning these are positive cash flows na from the corporation's viewpoint. Okay, so So notice that the beginning of a given year is the end of the preceding year. So, dali naman siguro. Kani siya, at the end sa year 1, mo ang beginning sa year 2. So, nagka-inside sila. So, I think that's understandable. I hope this helps sa pag-diagram. This is a simple example of how you draw a cash flow diagram. Okay, so let's consider example 4-2 in developing a net cash flow table. Okay, so this presents a situation in which cash flows are represented in tabular form para ma-facilitate ito ang mga analysis of plans and designs sa problem mismo. Okay, let's read the problem. In a company's renovation of a small office building, 2 feasible alternatives for upgrading the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning or HVAC system have been identified. So either alternative A or alternative B must be implemented. So the costs are as follows. Kani siya na figure on your screen, muna siya ang alternative na pilian sa company. So, should they go for alternative A nga mauna siya ang following na kuan niya costs. So, we have here 18K equipment, labor, annual cost is of electricity is 32, maintenance is 24. For alternative B, mag-install gid ka og new HVAC system that utilizes existing ductwork. So again, the alternative A is i-rebuild lang nimo or say overhaul the existing HVAC system. But in alternative B, you have to install a new one. So to do that, of course, dako gid kaayo expected na it will cost the company more in just the first na ang equipment pa lang, labor, and materials to be installed. So, the annual cost of electricity is 9,000 and annual maintenance expenses is 16K. Replacement of a major components for years, for component 4 years, every 4 years is 9,400. Okay, so given that alternatives, at the end of 8 years, the estimated market value for alternative A is $2,000, and for alternative B, it is 8,000. Assume that both alternatives will provide comparable service, or i-term na to siya as comfort over an 8-year period, and assume that a major component replaced in alternative B will have no market value at the end of year 8. First, use a cash flow table and end-of-year convention to tabulate the net cash flows for both alternatives. And second is, we have to determine the annual net cash flow difference between the alternatives B minus A. Okay, so as a solution, okay, so in the right side of this presentation is the cash flow table. This is from the company's viewpoint, and Actually, this is being computed using a spreadsheet in which I will be attaching in your LMS. So you should go check it out, download it, and study it. Actually, it's this is just a simple example kung diyon sa siya pag-compute ni ang kaning given na on how to develop a net cash flow table. So, on the basis of of these results, several points can be made. Wait. Um, let's try to open the attached Excel file. Okay, so this is how the Excel file that I prepared looks like. First, given katong problem that I mentioned, number one, doing nothing is not an option. So, di pwede nga wala kay buhaton. So, you could choose either A or B. And second, even though positive and negative cash flows are included in the table, diba? On balance, we are investigating the cost only alternatives. And third, a decision between the two alternatives can be made just as easily kung tan-awon lang nimo ang difference of the cash flows because on the later part of the problem, I mentioned na ang second na pangita nato is to determine the annual net cash flow difference between the alternatives na B minus A. Okay, so and ang fourth na we could kanang consider is alternative B. Later, we will kanang explore this one. Has cash flows identical to those of alternative A. So, except for the differences shown in the table. Natay differences niya. And so, if the avoidable difference can pay its own way, alternative B, ang atong i-choose. And fifth is cash flow changes caused by inflation or other suspected influences could have easily been inserted in the table and included in the analysis. So, daghan pa man po kanang pwede na factors na pwede madugang nato, and you can do that. And, ang sixth is it takes 6 years for the extra 42,000 na $42,000 investment in alternative B to generate. Okay, so sufficient cumulative savings in annual expenses to justify the higher investment. Pero dire ma-ignore na nato ang time value sa money. So unsa ang alternative na better? Mas ma-answer ni nato na question if i-consider nato ang time value of money in order to recommend choices between the alternatives. Okay, so let's try to kanang isa-isahon na lang nato ni ang mga inputs. So, diba, it is said na sa naka 8-year period. Diba? So, mo ni siya ang naa sa column A. Ang column B, which is alternative A, mo ni siya ang net cash flow for your alternative A. And this is alternative B na net cash flow. So first, consider na to si alternative A, this one here. Asa tagikan sa 18,000, this is from the equipment, labor, and materials to rebuild. Paano na ang imong mga gastuhonon. While sa B, sige, sa isa tatanan. So, ingon diri sa given, naapod kay annual cost of electricity, and then naapod kay annual maintenance of expenses. That's why sa end of year 1, naanakay, nag-add up na to siya. That's why mag 34,400 na siya up to this one here. Now, sa 8th year, ang 34,400 is i-subtract na nimo to ang market value which is mentioned in our problem, which is 2,000 for alternative A. Mo na siya ang market value. Okay? So, mo nang 32,400 na siya. Now, let's move to alternative B. Alternative B, the $60,000 is from the equipment, labor, and materials to install. So, remember that alternative B, mag-install gid ka og new HVAC system. So, mahal-mahal gid siya compared sa initial lang niya na net cash flow sa A. Okay? Kaya of course, sa A, i-rebuild raman nimo ang existing. Sa B is you are purchasing a new HVAC system in which you are going to install. That's why mahal-mahal gid ang first niya. So, kani sa 0 pa lang, sa end of kani now. Okay? So, later on, if you can observe, mugamay siya, unlike diri sa alternative A nga magkadako, because they are considering ang annual expenses. Here sa B, ang gi-consider lang nato diri, dako gid siya sa pag-install pa lang sa first, then sa preceding na mga years, of course, dili gid mawala ang annual cost of electricity or annual maintenance expenses. And okay, so this is worth noting sa fourth year na akay na dugang dere. This is from your replacement of a major component sa 4 years. At the end sa 4 years. So, murag every 4 years siya, nga na, mag-replace siya og major component. So, which is 9,400. So, nadak-an na po siya. And then, okay naman. So, na magbalik na dayon ka sa imong usual expenses. Now, sa last part, the 17,000, diba you have 25,000. Then, mag-minus ka diri of 8,000 because your 8,000 is your estimated market value sa 8 year. Okay, so okay na ni siya si alternative A. We have explored na kung giyon sa niya pag-compute, pag-derive by period na net cash flow. Okay, now let's go to the difference. Difference is simply computed as kanang B minus A. Ana lang. Okay? B minus A. So, kana siya, 42,9494 and 15,400. So, one of the questions kay ang to determine the annual net cash flow difference between alternatives B minus A. So that would be for these columns na difference and cumulative difference will help you analyze and facilitate the analysis of inyong mga ibang compare na mga values. Okay, so what else? It should be apparent that the cash flow table clarifies the timing of cash flows, the assumptions that are being made, and the data are available. Sometimes, actually, we can, diba, of course, kabalo naman ta sa katong diagram, na katong na ay arrow, but if too much data or daghan ra kaayo, and like this, natay end of year, then pangitaan pala itong net cash flow. So, better na use the table para mas ma-plaster nimo sila tanan. Okay? And, yeah, a cash flow table is often useful when the complexity of a situation makes it difficult to show all cash flow amounts on a diagram. So yeah, I think that's it for this example. And so this is the end of topic 2, lecture 2. Thank you.